Remove oil from the tapestry of modern life and something disturbing happens, because oil is built into almost everything, from critical medical equipment to everyday objects. If a reliable supply of cheap oil vanishes, our way of life will begin to blink out.
We've already entered the zone of what I call the long emergency, a period of turbulence and hardship and economic distress that's going to go on for quite a while.
Meet James Howard Kunstler, author, futurist, working on his backyard gardening skills because he says we're going to need them. The era of cheap oil is almost over. In the beginning, the energy in agriculture came from animals and men. Then there was oil to fuel the machines, to make the fertilizers and chemicals, meaning bigger farms, further from markets. So that now the food on our plates depends almost entirely on cheap oil.
Remember, you can state categorically, everything organized at the giant scale is going to get in trouble in the post-cheap oil era, including the 3,000-acre farms in the Midwest and Saskatchewan, the giant scale of things. We got a lot of fertilizers made from natural gas, which is a hydrocarbon oil-related product, and a lot of herbicides and pesticides made from oil, and a lot of diesel fuel to run enormous machines on enormous tracts of land. We grow the tomatoes and the lettuce in California, and we truck them across the continent. And that's been a luxury of the cheap oil age, where now the truckers can't afford to take these loads. And I think as time goes on, it's going to become just prohibitively expensive to do this. We're going to have to grow food on a more modest scale, probably on smaller farms, and probably in a way that will require more human attention. A lot of the best farmland that is proximate to our cities has already been paved over and turned into suburbs, or one thing or another connected with suburbs. We're not going to get that land back anytime soon, if at all.
Oil built the suburbs. In the 50s, the car made it possible to live outside the city, and so began the suburban building boom that continues to this day. Vast expanses of homes that face an uncertain future if it becomes too expensive to drive a car.
The suburban project is over, and we'll see our cities contracting substantially, and the suburbs around the big cities getting into a lot of trouble and losing value, losing their usefulness. And I think we will see people moving back to the smaller towns, to the smaller cities that are scaled appropriately to the energy diet of the future, and places that have a meaningful relationship with a productive agricultural hinterland.
Transportation in the industrial age started with railways, trains powered by steam and then by coal. Later, the landscape was carved up for highways, and airplanes filled the skies. Take away cheap oil and everything will change. Waterways could be the highways of the future.
The basic equation is it's absolutely the cheapest way to move large quantities of stuff. Far and away, even more efficient and economic than rail. Although I personally have hopes that we are going to revive our railroad system. There is another project that we could do right away that would have a bigger impact on our oil use than restoring passenger railroad service in North America. It's imperative that we do this because we may not have a way to get around long distances in a couple of years without it. The airlines are not making it on the current equation of fuel costs, and there's no way that they can make it and pass on the costs to the users and still have a middle-class ridership base. I imagine that air travel is going to be a much more elite activity, at least for a while, and then it may disappear altogether. What happens when a large fraction of the population can no longer participate in the happy motoring system? They can't afford the gas for the vehicles. They can't afford to buy the vehicles. And they're sort of foreclosed from the whole thing. Does that generate a lot of grievance and resentment against the people who are still motoring? And are the people who are not motoring going to pay for the road maintenance and the improvements and, the tremendous costs of maintaining the infrastructure for happy motoring? I'm not convinced that they will.
What about solar power, wind power? Trouble is, it takes cheap oil to build the machines for alternative fuel.
Many of the alternative energy systems that we have invested our hopes in actually depend on an underlying oil economy to be able to even make them happen. You know, I think that the solar and wind industries are examples of that. Without an underlying oil economy or fossil fuel economy, it's very hard to produce the components for these giant wind turbines and for solar arrays. I think that we should use alternative energies, and we're going to use alternative energies, but we're probably going to be disappointed in what they can do for us. We're probably going to have to make other arrangements for all the major activities of everyday life.
Life after cheap oil will be slower, shaped by whatever takes the least amount of energy. There could be fighting over remaining resources. Wood and coal will be burned, creating pollution and hastening global warming.
So many people assume that we're entitled to a smooth segue, a smooth transition between where we're at now and where we're headed in the post-oil period. And I wouldn't assume that at all. You know, I think that what we're going to see is a lot of political trouble and quite a lot of economic and social distress as incomes are lost and jobs are lost and ways of life become untenable. And we're going to see a politics of resentment and grievance on the part of a large new former middle class, people who, you know, had expectations about a certain kind of life. I worry, I suppose, most about social disorder and the potential for the great losses that people experience mounting into anger and grievance and violence and criminal behavior, and a law enforcement system that will not be able to keep up with this, and really an unraveling social contract in the face of absolutely extraordinary circumstances.
It's an extreme view, but for those who try to imagine a world without cheap oil, the entire tapestry of modern life begins to unravel. Kelly Crow, CBC.